Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order of the General Government Relations Subcommittee. And we're only doing the 07 amended budget at this time. We will do the 08 budget hearing separately. As you all recall from our meeting we had back in September, the governor had asked the agencies to submit, I guess, what he called flat budget requests. And if they had anything, if there was anything they were requesting new to be added to the 07 amended budget, he'd asked them to submit a written white paper explanation of what it was. Not necessarily as a budget request, but something they could, something that the governor's office and the Office of Budget and Planning could consider. So most of these will probably be, as I've looked through them briefly, I think most of these will be pretty flat. But I want to give each of the agencies an opportunity to come in and make their presentation. If they have any requests, I mean, we'll certainly, any requests beyond what the governor has requested or recommended, we'll certainly consider those and give them an opportunity to make their presentation. And of course, as always, I hope the members of the subcommittee will ask questions as you feel appropriate. These hearings are broadcast on the internet. I want to make sure remind everybody about that. To the agencies or whoever makes the presentation, when you come up, I would like for you to go to the microphone over there, and since these are broadcast on the internet and also archived so that they can be retrieved, I want to make certain that you speak into the microphone so that that will be recorded. And I would also like to ask before we get started, ask the members of the subcommittee to introduce yourselves. We need to get some cards to put up here. It's something I haven't done. I failed to do. We need to get some cards and name cards because this is broadcast on the internet. So somebody is looking in.
Their names show up.
The names do show up, but I would ask you to introduce yourself, starting with Chairman Smith down here.
My mic number is 25.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Lynn Smith. I represent Calvert County in the city of Indian, about 40 miles southwest of Atlanta. This is my 11th year, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you. And next would be Representative Black.
My mic number is 24. I'm Ellis Black from District 174, which is right down on the Florida line. I actually live below Valdosta, and this is my 7th year, and looking forward to working with this group.
My name is James Mills. I represent the southern portion of Hall County, which includes the Chestnut Mountain, Gainesville, Oakwood, Flower Branch area. This is my 15th year in the legislature, and I appreciate the opportunity to serve in this position.
Chairman Hill.
My name's Calvin Hill, representing District 21, which is Cherokee County, where the metro meets the mountains, a beautiful part of the state. And I certainly appreciate working on this committee again and seeing what we can do to help the state go forward in its budgeting.
Good morning. I'm Roger Williams, representing District 4, which is a portion of City of Dalton and portions of Whitfield County. It's a pleasure to be on this committee with Chairman Parsons. Look forward to working with all the agency heads to perfect our 2007 budget.
Thank you. And I'm Representative Don Parsons. I represent District 42 in East Cobb County. I'm from the community of Blackwell in East Cobb County. And this is the second term, and I've had the opportunity to chair this subcommittee, and very happy to do that. Also, our committee aide. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Janae Burke. I'm the aide for the Appropriations Committee.
And also glad to have our budget staff, some of the budget staff here. We appreciate what you do for us. Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming. We'll go ahead and get started now. And the first agency we have on our schedule today is audits. Mr. Hinton. Make sure it's turned on. Do you know which one you're doing? Oh, okay. Thank you.
Good morning. I very much appreciate the opportunity to appear before the committee. To give you a couple of operational notes on how we finished up fiscal year 2006, I think the state as a whole experienced some timing delays with regard to their accounting records due to a PeopleSoft conversion to a new version. But we were able to get the state's CAFR out by January the 12th. Our goal was December the 31st once again, but we're close enough to where we're pleasing the bond rating agencies with our timelier reporting of our financial situation. We had a recommended recoupment of $23.2 million for overpayments of claims in the Medicaid program. Those requests for recoupments will be handled in some cases through the state health care fraud unit, which we're a part of that with the Attorney General's office and the GBI. But hopefully we will be able to recoup those monies back into the Medicaid program. We also do work on behalf of the federal government for some of their compliance issues. And through billing of the agencies for our audit time, we brought $4.6 million billed to those agencies that would be brought back into the state. We collect those dollars and they go straight into the Treasury. We conducted about 500 audits or projects and did approximately 1,700 desk reviews of audited financial statements of local governments and such, and nonprofits. We performed 22 performance audits and identified some areas of need, like taking a look at user fees, how the state sets those up, looking at the internal controls over some of our tax credits, and just a wide range of topics which we've done at the behest of both the House, the Senate, and the Governor's office. Our performance measures, which appear in the Governor's budget document, we're very proud of. We had our external peer review during that fiscal period, and we're reviewed every 3 years by outside auditors from the National State Auditors Association and the federal government, and our report was received with no comments or no problems noted. They gave us a clean bill of health there. Seven of our 8 sub-programs met their deadlines for timeliness guidelines for issuing reports. And our follow-up reviews, which we did based on our previous performance audits, we found that 86% of our recommendations were addressed in some way, either by the legislature or by the agency through corrective action. And we're pretty proud of that fact. We feel like that if we can get the agencies to accept our recommendations, that we're we're doing our job, and we've presented fairly. It's sort of hard to get a good response on a customer satisfaction survey if you're an auditor, but so we go around the backside. Our request this year is really it's a holdover from actions that were taken in last year's budget. As the committee may recall, our budget, the Department of Audit's budget, just as the judicial budget and the legislative budget, are required to be submitted to the governor in September prior to him putting together his amended budget or the general appropriations budget. And as such, the timing, we're not aware at the time that the budget is put together of certain rate increases or whatever. Last year, we experienced a rate increase for employers' health insurance that wasn't funded in the governor's recommendation in the amount of $446,000. That represented an increase based on our payroll from 14.2% to 16.71%. And that wasn't contemplated in our budget for fiscal year 07, but we're paying that monthly based on our payrolls. That amounts to a request in the amended for $446,000. We also experienced a similar increase with regard to workers' compensation premiums. That was $16,000, as well as our landlord went up on our rent. The GBA went up on our rent to the tune of about $162,000. Those three items were not contemplated, nor were they funded in the FY07 general appropriation that y'all passed last year, and so we're coming to you asking you for that, and unfortunately we're gonna have a similar situation in 08. So because the rent went up again, workers' comp went up again, and the health insurance rates went up significantly, the employer's share. But once again, due to the timing of the submission of our budget and the governor's inability to adjust our budget during his process, those items were not funded, and we would come before the committee to seek that those be added to our budget in the amended for 07. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to address them.
Okay, we do have questions. I'm having a hard time. I wasn't looking who got first there.
Oh, no, it doesn't matter.
Well, what's your number, Chairman Mills?
I would defer to
Okay.
Jim first, if you don't mind.
And you are 24?
I'm 25. Thank you for your presentation.
Yes, ma'am.
I see that it is approved in our 07 supplemental. But my question is, when do our agencies know about these increases? Because we will hear this from you, and we understand that you present early, but then we hear the same story from every presentation. And so I think that's a good question for the audit department.
Well,
why are we getting this information so that we're having to make what should be business practice adjustments to a budget?
Yes, ma'am. As far as the timing goes, it's my understanding that when the governor is developing his budget, probably sometime in November and December, that certain of these decisions are made during that process, looking at the state as a whole, maybe determining a funding level, say, for the Georgia Building Authority. Are they going to be collecting enough money? So that process, those decisions are made at that particular time. It's my understanding, but I'm not privy to those meetings. But
thank you, Mr. Chairman. a future date, I think that's an area we can look into, because it seems to be more or less how we handle what to me are just basic business practices, and maybe we can get the Georgia Building Authority to present their budget at the same time our other 3 agencies are having to do early in the process as opposed to late, because we'll hear the same story from now on. Thank you. Thank you very much, and it's a good presentation.
Thank you, Representative Smith. I agree. I'm trying to think it through, and, you know, having listened to the auditor, the problem is that, you know, these people whose rates increase due to the final recommendation from the governor, those recommendations haven't been finalized until after they made their
case.
So I don't. That's a very good point. Very good question. Thank you, Chairman Mills. You still.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to reiterate what has already been shared. I remember we went through this very similar discussion last year with Georgia Building Authority, and it's kind of hard for us to keep hearing this year after year. So I'd really like to see something done in that regard. But the question that I had was on your presentation that you handed out.
Yes, sir.
Dealing with. It doesn't have a page, but it's dealing with the audits that you did on the Medicaid providers.
Yes, sir.
And it resulted in $23.2 million in recommended recoup for overpayments to claims.
Yes, sir.
What has been done about that? That's quite a bit of money out there that needs to be recouped.
Yes, sir. Basically, three actions ultimately result from these recommendations. On behalf of the Department of Community Health, we perform audits of providers through certain classes. And based on the results of our reviews, we will statistically project an overpayment amount and talk with the particular Medicaid provider. In many instances, they simply repay the money to the state, and it would go back to the Department of Community Health. In some instances, however, if the possibility of fraud is indicated, or where it looks like that we're not talking about errors in claims or errors in reporting by the particular provider, we may refer those to the State Health Care Fraud Control Unit. That unit is a cooperative effort between the Attorney General's Office, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and the Department of Audits. And those would be referred to that unit. A decision would be made by the investigators with GBI or with the lawyers out there as to how to pursue a particular claim, whether you're going to go for a criminal approach or if you're going to try and settle that claim civilly. And so those two, dependent upon that, obviously some of these dollars can drag out, but that would be the process for recoupment of those dollars.
Mr. Chairman, may I follow up?
Sure.
Is it possible for us to get a breakdown? I would assume that's broken down as to how much is error, how much is possible fraudulent.
Yes, sir. I'll be glad to. It'll take a little while to develop it, but we should have that information in the office, and I'll put you together some.
And of course, I think
go back several years and such as that. So, if you would like,
is the $23.2 million for several years?
Yeah, yes, sir. We would go back and we would look at claims for providers over a several year period, and look at the services that provider provided. We would generally look at 2 years worth of data to generate that. So portions of these claims might be based on payments that were made 2-3 fiscal years ago. But we have just gotten in to audit those claims, and so it's a sort of a rolling process. I mean, we'll add a year and drop a year and such as that. So, but I'll be glad to get you some statistics on the recoupments and the success that we've had.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hinton, I guess my question is particularly a follow-up on Chairman Mills. I am most interested in the recoupments, the money that has come back in this fiscal year, because these departments sometimes ask for more money, but they never tell us that they've got, perhaps they had 5 or 10 million come back this year, and we like to see that coming back in, because so often that is not perhaps reflected in their requests, and we'd like to look to balance it. So out of all of that, I am more interested in maybe what came back this fiscal year.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Now, I'd also like to point out that the dollars that are recouped, in certain instances, they've been matched by federal dollars. So, so they would go back into the Medicaid program, but the $23.2 million may include a federal component as well, which would have to be remitted back or credited back to against those federal dollars.
That would be good to see that breakdown. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I don't see any lights. I wanted to ask you I want to make sure before you leave that I have this right. The money that you're asking for, in addition to what the governor's recommendations are, obviously are not in this book, and I want to make sure I know. The number I have written down here doesn't match the sheet that y'all had given me. Would you just recap again? You had, I think, two requests. Is that right? I mean, I'm not seeing. I'm sure it's probably in here, but I'm not seeing it. You had two requests.
Yes, sir. We had a request for. Well, it was 3 particular expenditure areas.
Okay.
The employer health insurance would be based on the increase from 14.2% to 16.71% of payroll. That would amount to $446,267.
Okay, $446,000.
Okay. And then workers.
I'm not seeing it on here like that. I guess I'm just not reading correctly. According to this sheet now, and here I'm probably reading it incorrectly. Oh, wait a minute, here it is. Additional funds requested. You've got a $384,000, and then the $34,000. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Oh, okay. We haven't even seen the tracking document yet.
I'm actually looking at the one that you had given us.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. If you look at the total of the 3 components,
okay,
they would tie into the $624,655 on this tracking sheet. Is that what you're working for?
I'm looking at this. Y'all gave us a couple of handouts, and I'm looking at the one that has
the highlighted areas.
Ones, and I was assuming this is the one that had your request on there.
Yes, sir. This is broken down by the programs that we operate under.
Okay.
And if you look down in the bottom corner of the page, that totals to the $624,000, and it's broken down by program on this sheet. And then on the cover sheet there, the letter would break it down by particular expenditure category.
Okay.
It's just a different slice and dice of the same number.
So it's a total of $624,000.
Yes, sir. That would comprise our request.
And that's because of the difference in health insurance rates.
Yes, sir. Health insurance, workers' compensation, and GBA rentals.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we have a question.
On going back to Representative Smith's concern about not knowing when these rate increases or increases in the budget, Russell, is there any way that these department heads, agencies, when they come before the governor for him to formulate his budget, is there any way to require them to know then what's going to be asked for, say in 2008 or 2007? Don't they have a year? I know we're on a fiscal year that's probably different than what some of the calendar year things are, but isn't there some way we could simplify that and say, if you're going to increase our rent next year, come to me with it now and rather than wait?
I would prefer that. I would prefer that, but in each of these areas, I think that there are probably some policy decisions that are involved in whether or not to increase the health insurance rates, and the appropriate time for those agencies to make those decisions. I guess that's debatable. It would, as an agency head, it would be very nice if we did have that information prior to submitting our budget, because then I wouldn't have to come ask y'all.
Now, you
sounds awful.
I want to make sure I understand this too now, and I understand the position this puts you in, but the reason for this is that your budget request is handled like the judiciary. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Judiciary and the legislative.
And the governor actually can't.
No, sir.
He can't make changes.
Yes, sir. The statute calls for those three budgets to be submitted by September the 1st to the governor's office. But because of the separation of powers, I'm assuming with regard to those budgets, the governor's budget staff has to include those requests in his document without adjustment. In other words, the governor does not adjust the judicial or the legislative branch budgets. And so that timing with us having to submit by September the 1st in accordance with the statute, and the development of the governor's budget document coming in sometime in December, we sort of get behind the 8 ball on that.
Okay.
So.
Well, as the state auditor, can you give us any advice where we can find $624,000?
May have to go audit somebody a little harder.
All right. Well, I appreciate the presentation. I don't see any more questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming to us. Oh, let me ask you one more question.
Yes, sir.
Will you have a formal request for this in the form of a letter or something like that?
That would constitute our request.
This is okay. I got you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I've got it in my hand. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Next, we have workers' comp.
Good morning. It's good to see everybody back. Welcome back. And just briefly, the Workers' Comp Board thinks they're going well. The latest filings with the NCCI for workers' comp insurance shows our system is stable. The rates have changed a little bit this year. That's done through the Insurance Commissioner's Office, but that's because of the repeal of the Subsequent Injury Trust Fund, which the legislature took up over the last couple of years. I will just say that, as you know by now, because I start out all presentations by saying we're not funded by tax funds, but our budget is funded by an assessment that we make on all insurance carriers and self-insured employers doing workers' comp coverage in the state of Georgia. So wherever our budget is set, then we assess that much on a prorated basis. Our assessment for agencies across the country, workers' comp that are run this way, our assessment is below 1%, and it's, I think, the second lowest in the United States. And that's the money that we used after going through the appropriations process to regulate the system. The market for workers' compensation insurance is still good in Georgia. We have a lot of competitors, and that's good. So we have about 300 companies writing workers' comp. The as far as we'll go right to our amended budget request. We too have some, have to move things around from one section to another. I think this committee, the first time I came here a few years ago, really started some work that helped me as an agency head and our agency as a whole and the other executive branch agencies, is that now in the budget, in our yearly, the way we manage our business, we can move things around from one program to another and within programs without coming for special permission. This year in the amended budget, we're not requesting any additional funds. We had to absorb some other costs like the health insurance costs and our payment to DOAS risk management for workers' compensation coverage for the self-insured program of the state. But we're just asking to move $18,000 from our telecommunications line item and put it back into regular operating. We will use that to cover some other, of the unfunded increases that we experienced over the last few years. One of those is that we have some traveling employees. Our administrative law judges are required to hold hearings. We have field offices around the state, up in Dalton and Savannah and different Columbus, but they're still required to travel to the county of injury or contiguous county for hearings. We also have compliance officers who do checks. And as you know, a few years ago, it's been about 3 years, I think, which session, I'm not quite sure, the legislature, y'all, attached the mileage reimbursement for state traveling employees to the federal rate of reimbursement. So it went from like 28 cents a mile to, I think now we're at 40 point, it's in fractions now. That makes it harder for me. But so that $18,000 into regular operating will allow us to just cover those kind of expenses that we're not budgeted for. We, too, turn in our budget to the governor at the end of August. It's due by September 1st. And there are some interplays and changes which happen when all of us submit our budgets. Some of the agencies, like Merit System you'll be hearing from, and DOAS, their charges get built into our budget, which we give, so we make the payment to them. But we don't know what their needs will be until the governor makes his decision on them. This year, the Georgia Technology Authority, the $18,000 reduction that they have kind of spread across all agencies, you'll be hearing probably something of that in these amended budgets. That the governor did build in a potential savings in based on the charges of GTA to us, which they came up with during their process. We're asking that we be, and the governor's recommended that we use that to cover some other perhaps unfunded items.
Okay, thank you. I think we have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know who to ask this question of, and thank you for your presentation, ma'am. And I don't know the size of your department as compared to audits, but I was amazed, or the number of employees or anything else, that audits just asked us for $626,000 because of the increase of rent and health insurance, and you're not asking for any. I'm trying to compare the differences, right. And I don't know how much square footage you occupy versus them and how many employees you have versus them, but to me that seems like a tremendous differential when I think you might be fairly close to the same size.
Right. We have we're budgeted for, we have 166 if we were completely at full staff. We've been operating at about between 8 and 12 people short. Just,
so 150.
So about 150. We have all of our leases until this fiscal year have not been through the Georgia Building Authority. Our largest lease is in Atlanta. As of now, we are under the Georgia Building Authority, and we will be coming to you with the 08 budget for some increases, but mainly that is based on some security additions that we made to our Atlanta office for the courtrooms and the mediation spaces to protect us and the public who comes to us. The other 9 field offices, which are around the state, those leases are with the help of the building authority and space management. They've kind of rearranged. Those are leases from private companies and private individuals. We kind of try to build in and we try to do we have to do a year-by-year lease with them, but we try to do it on a 5-year projection, and we try to build in a little small increases, incremental, going along.
Thank you. It's nice to know that we can work better with private industry than we can with our own departments in budgeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But I think that Gina Abrams has been a real help to us in getting our Atlanta lease done through GBA, and I will compliment her and her staff on that. So.
Thank you.
Judge Hall, I appreciate the job that you do, and we've got a good workers' comp system, I think, in Georgia. It works well, and I appreciate what you and the board do. Out of curiosity, is there a formula when you get federal funds? Is it a set amount? Is it on a formula? And do they cover any of the operating costs of the workers' comp board?
Right. Now, we get no federal funds or tax funds of any kind. All of our funds come from our assessment on the carriers and self-insureds. Okay. And we collect that once a year, and then our Tom Risco makes that check out to Treasury, and then we draw down from that throughout the year.
Okay, so it's based on a loss ratio of what you would assess, bring the funds in to cover.
Right. It's based on a percentage of premium, so it's volume, not on really losses. And for the self-insureds, the assessment is done on a kind of a projection of what their premium would be based upon number of employees and classifications of those employees.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't think there are any further questions. Before you step down, I just want to make sure. So your 07 budget request or the governor's recommendation shows no, it's flat as far as
it's flat. It's just allowing us to. We've gotten a lot more flexibility in moving funds. But this particular classification, we need your help to do it, so we're asking for that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Look forward to seeing you for the 08.
All right, look forward to seeing you. Next, we have the merit system. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee. It's certainly a pleasure for me to be here today. I'm Steve Stevenson, the relatively new commissioner of the Georgia Merit System, and new, I mean 2 months. So my first opportunity to actually ever present in front of a distinguished group like this, and like I said, it's a pleasure to be here. What I'd like to do is just give a brief update of what our budget is and the agency funds for the 08 year, and also give you a direction of where we're headed with the merit system over the next couple of years. The merit system, which is the state's central human resources agency, works with state agencies to hire, train, develop, and retain their workforce, enhance organizational development, performance, and provide employee benefits and financial security services through the administration of the state's flexible benefit programs. If you turn to page 2 in the handout, you'll find that the agency's fund source, which is included in the FY 2008 governor's budget recommendation. And as you see, we receive no direct state funds and are funded primarily by agency assessments and nominal fee income. The breakdown of that for the 08 funds, of course, totals $14.6 million. The breakdown, $12.6 million of that comes from agency assessments. This is the $147 per position that GMS receives from agencies of the executive branch. It excludes all authorities. $1.2 million from the Flex Fund. These funds come from interest and forfeiters. It also includes a monthly 30-cent fee to fix flexible benefit premiums of $5 or more, excluding spending accounts. $0.3 million from fee income. It's income generated from special projects, surveys that GMS performs for state agencies, conference registrations that we perform for agencies across the state, and customized training programs which we're intimately involved in. And also training provided by the Compensation, Staffing, and Workforce Development divisions. $0.3 million for the leadership program, and then $0.2 million for the charitable contributions, the administrative fees to manage the program. The last 2 calendar years has averaged about 5%. So basically, you'll see all of our funding comes from agencies and also work that we do for those agencies within state government. If you'll turn to page 3, you'll find the agency's vision, mission, and core business, which is workforce recruitment, retention, and development services. On page 4, you'll also see a direct link of the merit system services to the governor's strategic vision for state government. I'd like to talk about this one a little bit. We've all heard about the governor's vision to be the best managed state. Where we're headed in the merit system, along with a partnership with all the HR organizations from each agency, is to really be the best managed HR organization within the best managed state. Human resources, of course, is a critical component in making Georgia the best managed state in the nation. And as the merit system and HR community can continue to partner and align ourselves behind this vision, our focus will remain on driving the state forward in the state HR and strategic initiatives found on page 5. And I want to talk about kind of how we approach the initiatives, 9 of them. They were based on recommendations from the Commission of the New Georgia, the executive leadership of state government, which includes all agency heads, and also internal and external to the HR community. The planning and design work for the initiatives, which began a year ago, has given us a solid foundation to transform human resources in this state. Typically, if you know anything about human resources, if you go back 10 or 15 years, typical HR organizations were very transactional in their work. We're trying to move that transactional work to a very strategic focus within state government. We're currently in the implementation phase, and I'd like to take a few moments to highlight the initiatives individually. And that is on page 5. As again, I talked about the 9 initiatives. We're focusing on workforce planning, being able to deliver a fast, friendly, and simple statewide competency-based workforce planning program and process. Succession planning, focusing on the state having a succession planning system that aligns future management needs with people capable of meeting those needs. Recruiting, creation of a statewide technology-based process to recruit. Workforce development, enhanced system that develops the state's workforce more effectively at a lower cost and quicker. Performance management, creation of a user-friendly, competency-based performance management system which takes this state to a pay-for-performance platform. Absent management, tracking and managing absenteeism. HR policy, which is one of the governor's strategic focuses, is establishing the standardization of HR practices and guidelines across the state, but also allowing each of the agencies flexibility to run their agencies. Team Georgia, which specifically is a fully functional internet source for our state employees that they can go online and do self-service ability. And then PeopleSoft, which is a huge initiative. The state has really invested a lot in the PeopleSoft platform. It's our purpose to enhance and really leverage that investment, and we're interested in bringing on board e-recruiting, e-performance, and e-learning within that system. If you'll turn to page 6, I just want to highlight a couple of the major initiatives that we perform for the state in addition to the 9 initiatives. We get a lot of positive feedback from agencies regarding our Georgia Leadership Development Program. If you'll see on page 6, through the administration of the Georgia Leadership Institute, we're really building the state's bench strength for as far as employees and leadership development within the state, which is a key piece in having Georgia as the best managed state, because you've got to have somebody to lead that. As you can see from the listing, we've actually enhanced the program from last year by intensifying its delivery, which is resulting in a faster return on investment. Over the last, I think, 11, 12 months, we've actually ran about a little over 500 executive and middle managers through this program. A lot of good feedback. Actually had a graduation ceremony last Friday with about 50 people that had finished the program. So one of the things we're really proud of in the Georgia Merit System. On page 7, you'll find, as I mentioned, one of the large initiatives of the 9, the PeopleSoft initiative. It's really going to bring all of the HR platform together under one system, dealing with competency management, workforce development, planning, succession planning, online recruiting, performance management, and enterprise learning. As just recently coming from the private sector and been in HR for about 26 years, I've had the opportunity to deal with performance management, and I like to use it as an example of PeopleSoft. I came up in an environment where I did not have the use of PeopleSoft, and I think we've all sat down and if I've got 15 employees and I have to do performance management criteria on them every year. Prior to PeopleSoft, it would take me weeks to accomplish that. Handwritten forms, I'd have to sit down and do the competencies for each individual. The PeopleSoft platform, through e-performance, e-learning, and e-comp, really ties the pay performance piece to how you set competencies and goals for employees, and then how you pay for that after the delivery part of it. So anyway, big piece in what we're working on. I can tell you there's no other state that has, from what I've seen in the last few months, there's no other state that has really tried to get their arms around the complete HR platform like we're trying to do here in the state of Georgia. Again, these are just a few things that the merit system is working on to generate efficiencies in state government. We feel like we're playing a big part in helping the governor reach the best managed state goal. And we're also committed to being good stewards of the taxpayer dollars that you've entrusted us with. Because I'm new, I also have my Assistant Commissioner of Program Design and Implementation, Frank Heine, here to assist us if we have any questions regarding our budget, platform, anything that we're doing from a Georgia Merit System standpoint. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I do. I pushed. Go ahead. Okay. Thank you. And thank you for your presentation, Mr. Stevenson. I thought you did very well.
Thank you.
So your baptism of fire.
Well, I said it's a pleasure to be here. We'll see what I say next year when I get here.
And I applaud the efforts that your agency is making. And in the years I've served up here, I've noticed the hardest thing for us to do as a state is retention. And I know that you're trying to address that, but in essence, we compete with the business world. After we train our people, then they have a career platform to move somewhere else. I'm going in the direction of our health care. What is your biggest marketing tool or retention tool that you have available to you for your employees? Is it all is the package inclusive of all the benefits we're able to offer? Or how does it work? I'm just curious.
Well, there's a couple of things. It's interesting that you mentioned that. As I mentioned, I've been here 2 months, and one of the items that we are focusing on with that the governor's asked us to look at is retention issues, and it's not really one piece of the comp or benefit package that's the magic bullet. I mean, it really is encompassing on what you bring people in as far as base pay, and that's what we're lacking on from a state perspective. What we're finding out is in private industry, they're able to attract people because they can get them in the door with a much higher base pay, and also just the focus on how we're headed as far as the employment process of bringing new people on. Typically in years prior past, you'd bring people on board with a state that's very interested in their pension plan. Also, continuation of health insurance prior to employment years, or employment years and from retirement. Those are still critical issues that we'll be faced with for the next several years. But I also think we need to be looking at how do we compete with private industry to really recruit the best talent within the state. And that deals with base pay. It deals with looking at what that private industry is offering those people. They're offering nice 401ks that come in, that have matching pieces to that. They're offering incentive pay. From a state perspective, we're lagging behind when it comes to incentive, and that's one of the things that we're focusing on with these initiatives is that we're able to pay pay our people for performance, for good performance. And I think if we concentrate in those areas to really focus on getting the base pay up where we can attract people, and they don't use us as a training source, and typically that's kind of what's happening in some of our positions. They'll take the lower pay job knowing that we offer great training for the state, and then they go sell themselves to private industry. So it's all those things that we're focusing on. Number one, looking at entry level base pay, and also looking at a benefit package that really addresses short term and long term issues with the employee, and also allows us to get some flexibility and use from some of this talent that we're looking at.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I think we still have some questions. Chairman Hill? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Have the lights on. I'm not sure.
I think that's at 22, yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stevenson, I echo the Chairman's comments. It's an excellent presentation, and after 2 months you've come up to speed rather quickly. You did mention the successes that you felt that the programs have had, and I guess I was wondering what you're utilizing to quantify those successes, and does this PeopleSoft program that I realize is just now being implemented, will that in the future give you better capabilities of quantifying some of these things so they become perhaps less subjective and more objective, and we're able to track these successes a little better?
No, it does. And the PeopleSoft platform, as I mentioned, it ties in several platforms of HR. It ties in the performance measurement piece of it, and piggybacking with that, the compensation piece of it. So you establish your performance criteria, and then you pay according to that. So it all ties in from the perspective of it's not somebody out there just deciding what they're going to pay for somebody or what they're going to rate somebody for a given year. It's all tied together. And quite frankly, when the PeopleSoft initiative is up and running, from a headcount standpoint of people delivering HR across this organization, quite frankly, it's going to take less of us, because the system does a lot of transactional items that we do currently today.
Wonderful. Sounds like a great program. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think Representative Black had a question.
Thank you. I want to get you to comment on whether or not you were looking at what I call the career salary structures that so strongly entrenched in government, whereby people are hired at a salary and then continue to receive raises for longevity and years of service. This has been I think maybe a pattern in the past that it was applied in industry, but I have observed many segments of industry moving somewhat away from that and more along the lines of paying people for what to do it when they do it. But are y'all looking?
Yes, sir. That is and actually, it's one of the first conversations that I had about 3 months ago with the governor when he was interviewing me. He wanted to know what my background was from pay for performance perspective, and I know from a state piece, we're not any different from most states around the country as far as how we deal with compensation for state employees. But the key is, we have got to move from a system of everybody gets the same thing to a system of, we're going to sit down and we're going to evaluate what you've done for us the last year, and that's what you're going to be paid for. So, I think that's the direction that the governor's interested in seeing. Again, the initiatives, they're all together. There's not one initiative that stands alone. And the performance management piece that I mentioned in the initiatives is a key piece in establishing a system where you can go out and you can evaluate an employee through the last 12 years on what they did, and you compensate them as such. So, yes, very important piece.
Okay. Chairman Mills, you have a question?
Thank you. You've done an excellent job. Just curious, does your agency lease from GBA or a private?
I'm being told GBA, yes.
And there's no request for an unknown increase in this supplement?
No.
Did you get an increase from GBA?
Yeah, yes, we did.
Are give you an A+ for not asking for an increase and managing the taxpayers' dollars in such a way that you don't have to do that.
That might be my fault for being new to not knowing to ask for it.
If I may, one more.
Absolutely.
There's also not an increase in health insurance, which we see periodically among agencies asking in the supplemental budget. Is that being absorbed as well? There's an increase, but
Well, in the merit system, we do not administer the health plans for the state. That's the Department of Community Health. But I do believe that you want to comment on that?
If I may, the increase in rent, salary increases, and healthcare increases are all absorbed in our budget. This is one of the quirks of being funded in the manner we're funded by assessments and generating our own fees. We establish our budget and do the projections to our best ability. For that budget, if there's anything that comes up, we look at where we can tap into those additional resources.
But your question was specifically the health increase for the increase that will affect the Georgia Merit employees, right? Yeah, that's being absorbed within our current budget.
We have to go to the PB and get, amend our budget and that sort of thing, or get the budget transfers. But we do it within those resources.
And I guess that begs the question of how is it so easily absorbed in one agency, and yet a great increase is needed in another agency. And I know that you can't speak for another agency, but that's what we're all sitting here asking in our minds, I think.
Well, and probably deals with size. I mean, we're an agency of about 120 people, and we can project cost, and based on that, we also have the ability to generate revenue, so that helps out some.
Well, I applaud you for the way you're doing.
Let me add also, we're not in an agency where we submit our budget like audit or General Assembly or the judiciary in advance. We do it by the governor's deadline, but it's not formulated until the end of the year after the budget hearings and things are over. So more discretion to do that way.
Okay. Your question answered? Okay. Did you have another question?
I was just
Representative
going
Black?
what he just brought out, that in defense of all some of these other people, they have a different process they've got to go through, so consequently they don't have as much flexibility in advance planning time.
Okay. Well, thank you. I did. It does raise the question in my mind, though, when and I understand where the questions are coming from, but when an agency can absorb costs, it does make me wonder, well, why was there that much money there to begin with? And which also leads me to, I know that some of you, in your handout kind of points it out here, and I appreciate it, very nice handout, but refers to the governor's vision of the best managed state, and also makes references to some of the, this PeopleSoft, some of the things that were recommendations from the New Georgia Commission,
Right.
Which were all very laudable things, and we look forward to a lot of savings. Through this subcommittee 2 years ago, I guess it was, there was a good, a fair amount of money appropriated, or we didn't appropriate it. It was in the governor's recommendation, and most of it eventually came out as being appropriated for funds for the to implement some of these suggestions and ideas from the Commission of New Georgia, Commission on New Georgia, and part of that was this PeopleSoft. So I'm assuming that I would think that by now there would be, since you are using that, is that correct?
Limited pieces of it.
Okay. I guess where I'm going at, it would seem like maybe this is how you were able to absorb some of those costs. I mean, I would think that by this time you would have some savings. Or we should be seeing, I would think, we should be seeing savings due to the implementation of some of these programs and some of this money that was appropriated.
Right, and there will be. I mean, PeopleSoft will be a couple years down the road, the implementation piece of it. And again, the PeopleSoft platform is used by all agencies, so each agency will have savings when it comes to the use of that system,
Right.
not just the Georgia Merit system.
Right. But you had said, though, that for your evaluations of employees, or something I think that you had alluded to, that
Right.
now that you have the PeopleSoft, it makes it so much easier to do. So that's administrative time that's not being expended. I would think secretarial time.
Right.
There's somebody that's not doing something that they had to do before.
Right.
So you are seeing some savings through
yes,
that.
and we will when all of those initiatives are up online. The e-performance piece of it, I believe, comes online in June of this year. June or July of this year. So there's pieces of it that are online. The majority of them will be online by this summer and through 2008.
Okay.
And
Do you know how much you absorbed these costs, the rental, the health insurance? Do you know how much that was that you absorbed?
Total 500,000.
500,000, about $500,000. How much could you absorb? If you could absorb the $500,000, can you absorb another $1.5 million if we would decide to?
I'm gonna play on my. I've only been here 2 months. I'm not sure I can answer that question.
Okay.
But again, we do. We have the ability to generate revenue too, based on what agencies are asking us to do. From a training perspective. So we have the ability to make some money too to help with that situation.
Okay, and I appreciate it. I don't mean to, and I appreciate your job you're doing. I know you're new. It just always seems funny when somebody can absorb the exact cost that something was increased.
Mm-hmm.
If we did that in our own household, I would be a little bit, how did that work out? How did that just happen like that the increase exactly matched what we were able to absorb? Do you know how much for the rental alone, you had about $500,000 you had to absorb. Do you know how much the rental part was?
If I might add, while they're getting the figures for you, one thing with Merit System that makes us fairly unique is our programs are self-funded. So in many cases, the work that's done is paid for by the user.
Right.
Which we do projects. We're doing a project for the Department of Corrections right now. We're a successful bidder against some private industry, where we knew what the costs were going to be going into it, and they're paying us for our direct costs on it. So there's some trade-offs there that level some things out, and the training piece also.
Right. Well, that was a question I was going to ask. Have you increased any of your fees?
As far as Merit System assessments? Or
Right, the assessments.
No.
Assessments, no, sir.
Okay.
No, sir. As far as training fees, those are done on just a regular business principle of this is what it costs.
Okay.
This is what we pass on.
Well, as far as the rental, if somebody could get that to us, we don't have to. You don't have to right
Okay.
now. You get ready to go?
29. Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
The rental increase was $29,000.
$29,000 of the $500,000. Okay.
Right. The insurance piece was $395,000.
Okay.
And then the workers' comp piece of that was $51,000, and the salary adjustments were $99,000 for the total.
Okay.
So in the overall scheme of things, the rental increase was
Very small.
Very small.
Okay. I mean, you can understand why we'd want to. I mean, it raises the question. Don't mean to be rude or anything like that. I think there's another question.
Thank you very much. Just to follow up so we fully understand, I presume then if going forward you needed an increase in budget, you have the authority to raise the assessments without, is that within the scope?
With individual training that we're going to provide, we have the ability to do that.
With the departmental assessments?
No, we do not have. That's a policy.
It's in the appropriation.
Right.
Okay, that goes through the appropriations.
Right.
Thank you very much.
I believe that's all the questions we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right. Thanks.
Thank you for that. And next we have Banking Finance Commission.
Excuse me, sir.
Sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the team.
Turn this off.
Commissioner Braswell could not be here this morning because of a conflict. Excuse me. Because of a conflict, and he does regret not being here. He attempted to rearrange, but could not. My name is David Hancock, and I am the budget director, and I will try to, in an attempt to express to you our needs and also share with you our amended 07 budget. You have a handout in front of you, and we'll go through different segments of that over the next few minutes. You'll notice as we go back through the budget that the amended 07 budget is basically a flat budget. There is a small reduction in that budget due to the savings in as identified by the Commission for New Georgia. If you'll turn to page 1, this is basically for informational purposes. It shows the mission of our department, our vision, and our motto. In regards to our department, Commissioner Braswell was appointed last December when former Commissioner Sorrell retired, and we have had a number of strategic planning initiatives and discussions among senior management, and also tried to have buy-in from the people at the bottom all the way to the top. And we have identified several areas whereby we are trying to retain more of our examination staff and our employees. It's been a struggle for our department really over the past 5 to 6 years because of turnover. And just to briefly indicate to you, our examination staff is under, compared to other similar jobs in state government, the beginning salary of an examiner today is $31,620, which is almost 18% below what OPB, as well as the State Audit Department, pays their employees for similar complexities of types of work. So we are gradually over time, and the governor is working with our department and providing a small amount of funding each year so we can raise that hopefully to be somewhat similar to those other two agencies over time. We also compete with the federal agencies, the FDIC, the Office of the Comptroller, as well as the Federal Reserve Bank, and also private industry. We had one examiner who recently left about 6 or 9 months ago, who had been with us for about 3 years. He went to a commercial bank and got a raise of about $18,000 after being with us for 3 years. Of course, we do believe, and I think most of our staff believe, that we do have a good benefit package with the state. I know it's criticized from time to time. If you go out and look at private corporations as well as other governmental agencies and entities, I think the state does a remarkable job in providing those benefits, especially in regards to the health insurance package we have. We also try to provide flexible work hours. We are trying to improve training of our managers and mid-managers through the Georgia Institute of Training, and we have also tried to reduce travel among our examination team and do more work in our field offices rather than traveling long distances each day. And with the electronic means of shifting data and communicating, and with encryption, we feel very safe in doing such. If you'll turn to page 2 of the handout, this shows a listing of the entities that we regulate. And you'll see a history there from the end of 2001 all the way through the end of the most recent calendar year, 12/31/06. Back in the end of 2001, we had 267 banks compared to what we have today of 291. That takes a lot of manpower to examine those entities. However, you also need to recognize we are partners with the federal FDIC, and we usually examine about 60% of those entities compared to their 40%. unless it's deemed to be a troubled institution. If it is a problem institution, both we and the FDIC go in every 6 months to keep on track with the concerns we have identified. We have, for your information, we had 21 new banks open in 2006, and we now have 8 in the pipeline, either presented to us and or in the investigation stages at the present time. That is also an extreme impact on our manpower. It's also a good experience for examiners to be faced with those challenges. Most of our manpower resources are involved in the supervision and regulatory oversight over banks and the mortgage lenders and brokers. As you see, we have 3,222 licensed mortgage lenders and brokers as of the end of the most recent calendar year. We have about 65 bank examiners, which also examine credit unions, and we only have about 9 mortgage examiners. So we consider ourselves to be marginally staffed, and we appreciate the efforts of the governor to increase that level over the past few years. During the Barnes administration, we had some severe budget cuts, and that number dwindled down, but we've been able to increase that about 12 or 13 examiners over the past few years, and we were very appreciative of that. So we do have quite a bit of challenges facing us, as you can see on this page 2. If you'll turn to page 3, you'll see the growth in the supervised assets of state chartered banks and credit unions, again from 2001 all the way through June 30th of 2006, which is the most recent time frame whereby we have data showing assets of the institutions. Our 3 largest banks in the state that we have authority and jurisdiction over would be SunTrust, and we receive about $4 million per year revenue from them. Then Columbus Bank and Trust is the second largest, and they have about $6 billion in assets. And again, SunTrust has between $185 and $190 billion in assets. And the third largest state bank is United Community Bank with about $5 billion. And so we have specialized teams that focus on the ability to examine large institutions. It's very different to examine a large bank the size of SunTrust and Columbus Bank and Trust than a smaller community bank. Our revenue last year was about $22 million, and our budget usually fluctuates between $10 million and $11 million. So we take in about double what we receive back. Just for your, I believe most of you are aware of that, and we state that to this group each time. If you'll turn to page 4 of the handout, this is the only request that we have to increase our, or not to increase, but to redirect funds. The Commission for New Georgia identified about $58,000 in savings because of renegotiated rental leases, some computer savings, and also some savings in supplies. And so the governor allowed us to put on the table a need we have to use those funds. And he was generous and allowed us to, and is recommending that we be allowed to replace 3 of our aging vehicles, which have now about 140,000 miles on those vehicles, and are not always considered safe on long distance traveling. And so we hope to eventually, at the end of the session, if approved by you and the governor, replace 3 of those vehicles. So with that said, if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer those, and I'll open the floor for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation as well. Mr. Hancock, I noticed an increase in 2 more areas. I was always surprised at the increase, how quickly our mortgage brokers and lenders category was growing, and now I'm looking at our check cashers and our check sellers as being 2 rapidly increasing areas that you need to examine. So I was just curious as to how that's going and the type of personnel that you use for that process.
That is an excellent question. We have a division dedicated to that area. Again, manpower is very tight in that regard. We do some off-site monitoring, and basically we examine and investigate based on consumer complaints which come into our office.
So it's reactive then?
That's correct. We do have a questionnaire and a renewal process each year, and based upon the answers on that questionnaire, we may go in and do examinations of those entities in addition to receiving consumer complaints. So we're trying to do the best we can with the limited resources we have.
How many staff people do you have assigned to? I guess these 2 categories would be grouped together with your examiners?
That's correct. We do have, in fact, with check cashers, we have probably about, and sometimes we redirect manpower based upon need, which is necessary in state government when resources are limited. But with check cashers, we probably 3 or 4 examiners from during the year would go out and do examinations of those entities.
And same with money transmitters, I think?
Yes, ma'am. That's correct.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Representative James, what is your number down there? Did you have a question?
Number's 26.
Okay. I had the wrong number on for Chairman Smith. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple questions. First of all of the income comes from fees, is that correct?
That's correct. Assessments, fees, and fines and penalties depending upon the entity involved.
Now, first of all, you've made some money on you saved some money on your rental.
That's correct.
Now, when you're renting from an outside source and you went to state, in-house, or vice versa?
I'm not sure if I understand your question. I apologize.
Did you change renting from the state to a
No, so we have never leased property directly from the state. We have 5 geographical or regional areas throughout the state, and we lease directly from those, and we do not lease from the state.
What is your per square foot?
In regards to our main administrative office, which has an Atlanta address, but it's in the Shamley-Tucker area in the Koger Center complex across from Mercer University. We renegotiated that lease about 18 months ago, and that's where some of the savings is coming from. It started out like it was reduced down to $18 a square foot, and now it's close to $19. And in addition to that, as part of the negotiation process, they came in and our facilities really needed to be refurbished, and they agreed to recarpet free of charge, paint free of charge, and do some other areas that really needed upkeep for us at the same time.
One more question, Sheriff.
Sure. Go ahead.
As far as your staff, your manpower, if you have additional manpower, would that benefit the state any as far as you more efficiently doing your job and making sure that everything is on target and more people?
Yes, sir. In my opinion, it would. It would. Right now, as of today, we have about 125 employees. At one time, we had 136 employees. Our workload has grown. It can become quite stressful. We have lost some examiners and manpower because the stress has become quite heavy, and also the salaries were not competitive in the marketplace. So we have lost some because of that reason. But we want to be strong team players in the state system, and we realize that we operate with a number of other agencies who are having similar challenges and difficulties. But we also recognize that we bring in about twice as much as is appropriated back to us. But again, we want to be team players, and I want to emphasize that strongly.
There's one final.
Sure, go ahead.
With that being said, your case shouldn't be hard to make to get your staff up to speed, should it?
In my opinion, it should not be, but we have tried this. Ms. Smith, she realized she's been hearing us for years, and this is a story like a broken record over and over again. But again, the state has faced some revenue shortfalls and challenges, and we just do the best we can and try to prioritize. On some of the examinations we changed our approach to do a risk scope examination. Therefore, if we identify risk based upon data being submitted to us, we will prioritize. And I think we have been successful in meeting the mission of our department, even though our staff has come down. It would be nice and it'd be a luxury to have 5 or 10 additional examiners. But again, we don't operate just alone. We operate with all the other agencies in the state of importance.
Okay. Chairman Mills, do you have a question?
I do, since you asked.
Okay. What's your number? 23. Okay.
And I am from Gainesville, and I believe you're from that area too. So be kind, please.
Larry and Department of Banking and Finance does a great job.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I will relay your comment to the commissioner.
The commissioner does a great job as well. A couple of questions I had was along the lines of in the electronic day and age that we're now living in. Do you ever foresee a time to where that our banking inspectors can do much more of their work? I know there has to be a certain amount of physical looking at documents, but electronically, so that we're not we're eliminating a lot of this road time, a lot of more in electronic age.
Yes, sir. I do see that day, and I see it more each year. We're looking at some systems now that are encrypted. We have worked with the Federal Reserve Bank in that regard. We are looking at some IT initiatives that would allow us to do more of that and feel comfortable in that regard. When we communicate to institutions now, depending upon their willingness to communicate with us, we can send information back and forth and feel secure that no one else can come in and grab that data over the lines.
And then secondly, in regards to the earlier question of check sellers and check cashers, isn't there, don't they fall under some of the Homeland Security legislation federally in regards to background checks? Your comments earlier were 3 or 4 examiners, but isn't there a little more background done on who can wire or transfer?
That is correct. Depending upon the principle of the entity involved, about 3 years ago, we worked with GBI, and we have in our office now a scanner where they bring the fingerprint cards to us, and we can scan those in, and within less than 24 hours or 48 hours, depending upon the situation, we can have information directly back on that particular individual. At one time, we had to send that data off and wait for maybe weeks or 2 to 3 weeks. Now we can have it back within 2 days and know quickly whether that person has a criminal background of concern.
But there's no way of following up on if I set up a wire transfer business out of the basement of my home outside of a consumer reporting that, or somebody, a citizen. Is there any way electronically of stopping that? What method is used now other than just stumbling on discovery?
My understanding that would be the only method we have at the present time. But I will put that initiative or put that comment to the commissioner and the other management team which we have and see what can happen. That's a good question. It's just technology changes so fast, and also it costs to have the ability and the equipment to manage effectively and efficiently and carefully in such an environment where data can be captured over the internet, the web.
Okay.
Hopefully I answered your question to some extent.
Chairman Williams, do you have a question?
In regards to the check cashers, are this 713, is that the number of people in the check cashing business, or is that the number of complaints that you had to investigate, or exactly what is that figure?
Those are the numbers of licensed check cashers. And you see how it changed from how it's jumped in recent years.
What do we attribute that to?
That's a good question. I think it's a money-making endeavor. It's been a challenge for our department to manage effectively, but I think it's just more people coming into the state.
You see these mobile vans going around from business to business on payday to cash these checks. It's kind of a dangerous business in a way, I see. This didn't in any way involve any of the payday lending?
No, sir. They have to complete a renewal and an initial application, and one of the questions on there, which they have to, they should answer honestly, and sometimes they answer they are involved in payday lending. We will not license those, and then turn that information over to any proper authority.
Okay. Are the fees regulated on the amount that they can charge to cash these checks?
Yes, sir.
Do y'all set the rates, or?
The rates are, I'll have to go back and determine how those. I'll have to go back and determine, and I'll be glad to provide that information to you.
Mr. Chairman?
What's your name?
Number 22. Thank you very much. And I know we're running late here, and we appreciate it, Mr. Hancock, so I'll be very brief. But two follow-up questions on the check cash. Is it just coincidental, or do you think it is a direct result of payday lending going out of the state that just coincides with your tremendous increase in check cashers?
I think there's a relationship in that regard.
Okay.
I have not personally done a study, and before I obtained this position in state government, I was heavily involved in the regulating commercial banks and credit unions. That's a little bit out of my expertise.
Okay, and so I might better understand, is that the number of license holders in check cashers or actual stores?
No, many of the stores you'll see will be branches or agents. Those are actually the number of check cashers licensed.
So there might be more stores. The number of actual outlets might be
many
much
more,
larger.
much larger. Yes, sir.
Would we be able to get that information? Is that something
you mean the branches?
Capture?
The branches,
so
yes.
We know how many total outlets.
Yes, sir. I'll be glad to provide that to the chairman, and then that he can distribute that among the committee.
I'd appreciate that if we could, going back from 03 forward, I guess would cover.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
I'll be glad to do that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Governor's Floor Leader Golick has a question, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I go to the SunTrust Bank and right off Cumberland Mall and cash a check, I have to put in my driver's license, and they send what paltry sum the check amounts to back in the tube through the drive-through. When someone goes into a check cashing establishment, are there any variations or any differences in the identification or anything that they have to go ahead and present during that transaction?
You mean if the customer goes in?
Sure.
Yeah, my understanding is they have to present documentation which verifies who they are.
what are the, how is that documentation? Is it required to be a license, or what's the breadth of possible documentation they can use in order to?
You mean for the check casher or the customer?
Well, for the customer to use in order for the check casher to consummate the transaction.
Okay. Again, I'll be glad to give you more specifics on that when I provide this other data for you.
Thank you.
And I apologize for
the
lack of knowledge on that.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I had not. We would have provided more time. We're getting behind on our schedule. I didn't have any idea that we would need that much time for that. I do have a question. I know we do need to move on, but this may be something. Well, first of all, I want to verify what's here. Now, this $58,000. This is not in the governor's recommendation. Is this something you'd like for us to write into the budget?
No, so that is actually in there.
It is in there.
What they did, if you look at, you have a tracking document which is on page 10 of 21.
Right.
You'll see they have reduced our budget only $6,504.
Right.
And when they identified cost savings of $58,320. So the difference of that is the amount allocated toward purchase of vehicles.
Okay. And this may be something, probably is really a question for, not necessarily for you. It's something I need to get answered at some time. I didn't realize that, as I stated before, we're expecting savings based on these recommendations from the Commission on New Georgia. I'm confused about how they, though, identified these savings in your department. I didn't know we had Commission on New Georgia people going out in different departments doing their own little audits out there. How exactly did that happen?
Well, I know many months ago they contacted me in my office, and I began a process of trying to negotiate some of our larger leases to indicate we need to. It appeared to be out of line with the competition, with the market.
Right.
We needed to reduce that, and the state properties commission would be contacting them, and if they wanted to keep us where we are, we need to reduce that down below 18 or 19 at that time, and put a little pressure on them prior to the state properties commission discussing it with them, and they agreed to make the change.
Okay.
Is that?
Well, it does. And here again, it's not. I'm glad that the savings have been identified. I'm just. This is really.
There are a number of departments where savings have been identified, and.
I hope that they are, and I want to. I'm just confused about how the Commission on New Georgia. I don't see that. But that's something that can be clarified to me. I'm sure. I think the governor's floor leader might have some insight into that.
Just a question for you, Mr. Chairman. To bring my agenda, is the Commission for New Georgia, do they have a slot on any one of our agendas during this week?
No.
Would it be helpful to the chair and to the committee for me to contact the appropriate people and bring them forward in order to clarify any concerns that the chair
Yes, it'd be great.
Okay,
Yeah,
we'll go ahead and do that.
If you see on the tracking sheet under 15.4, right in the middle, it says realized CNG savings, as you notice.
Right. Okay.
And we've had a number of communication pieces from them over the past few months.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that the savings have been realized. I'm glad they're being identified. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming today.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
We'll have to provide more time for you in the 08 hearings.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry. We do have one more question. And you're 22.
I'm sorry. I will be quick, Mr. Hancock. In all the other departments, again, have asked for a tremendous increase due to health insurance and workman's comp, and I don't believe that was discussed. Have you all been able to absorb that? For 125 employees, I think another one in 120 was talking like $350,000. That's a lot of money. Were you able to absorb that, and did you get hit with the same increase?
Okay, for instance, let's jump ahead just for a minute to the 08 budget. When our 08 budget was prepared, we worked with or communicated with the Office of Planning and Budget. I think the House and Senate may have had some input into this. I'm not sure. But they determined how much we needed for the 08 budget. And they also did that for the 07 budget last year. And they added that to our budget to provide for that need we have. There would be really no way, and I think in our budget it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was In the '08 budget, I don't have it with me, but it was $300,000 plus in additional health insurance premiums, which the governor's team added to the '08 budget, so we would not have a shortfall. It would be we'd have to have a reduction in force to absorb that. We've been cut so much over the years, it's been difficult.
Okay, so to sort of restate that in my terms for myself, your department budgeted in anticipation of a probable increase, which we've had just about every year, and so that was in the budgeting process is again for '08. Perhaps some of the other departments that we're actually seeing this did not take that anticipatory step in budgeting, and therefore we're seeing the direct request.
Well, I'll give the credit to OPB for that. They manage their evaluation of budgets and add those funds in pursuant to the governor's recommendation.
Thank you very much.
I think audit is very different because they handle their affairs differently.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Thanks, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we have employees' retirement system. We appreciate y'all being patient. Sorry we're getting behind. But it is the budget of the state, so
Yes, it is.
people's money.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I've got a small handout for you, just overview of ERS. My name is Mike Neff. I've been director of ERS for the last 2 years. Having served up in Illinois, in Chicago, for 18 years with the Chicago teachers in municipal, with the Bears having made the Super Bowl, and my folks having relocated to Indianapolis, you can appreciate the excitement that the Neff family has next couple weeks. But very happy to be here in Georgia. The state of Georgia is actually among the top 3 most well-funded retirement systems in the country, much different than what I experienced up in Illinois. The state of Georgia, though, runs its systems very similar. We've got 7 different defined benefit plans that you see summarized on this page. Employees' retirement is by far the largest, representing approximately $14 billion of the $15 billion totally managed by the funds. The next largest is the public school employees non-teacher system. The Georgia Defined Contribution Plan, which I think is approximately $800 million, is in place for state employees that are not full-time. They tend to be seasonal, part-time employees. And the life insurance plan is the state-funded as well as employee-funded life insurance plan, also run by ERS. You'll recall a couple years ago the deferred comp programs were transferred from the merit system to ERS. I believe it was a recommendation of the Commission for New Georgia to do that. The plan wasn't necessarily to save money, but it was to really combine the efforts of the investment division so that investments could be managed not only for the $15 billion in ERS, but also the money managed for the deferred comp programs. And that's worked out very well. Most of the funds expended by ERS are from funds that are earned by ERS. For example, investment earnings last year were approximately $950 million. In addition to that, ERS collected approximately another $400 million from employer and employee contributions to the system. And then we expended approximately $1 billion in pension benefits. And as a result, the net increase to the system was approximately $400 million from year to year. So the fund is growing. As I said, State of Georgia does an excellent job of funding its retirement systems based upon the actuarial recommendations. Just generally speaking, what we do is we collect employee and employer contributions from state agencies and state employees. We invest that money, growing an average return of approximately 7.5% per year. And then we pay out the benefits, either refunds to employees that resign early, not long enough to accrue a pension, and then we pay the annual pension benefits out as well. About 97% of our budget is comprised of expenses like salaries, benefits, information technology to run our systems, and then auditors, actuaries, and professional service companies like that. We don't have any special increases to request. Our budgets are typically pretty flat from year to year because we don't really have that many changes in staff or projects. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we do have some questions. There's nobody at mic 24, is there? Would you push that button? Somebody sort of the light will go off. Well, okay, I think I have to do this. Okay. Chairman of Special Rules, Calvin Hill.
Thank you very much. About how many employees do you have in the department?
We have 97 employees in ERS.
Okay, I guess I need to ask this question because it's varying from department to department. Again, did you budget to absorb the projected increase in salary and workman's comp? Because that should probably total close to $370,000 to $300,000 increase that you got hit with in 2007.
Our situation is very much like the previous speaker, where OPB provides the additional amount to our budget. So that's actually factored in year to year. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to manage without an increase either.
How about rent increases? Are you renting from private industry or from...
Actually, ERS and TRS own its own building, and it's actually part of the investment portfolio. So those increases are managed. We simply pay ourselves the going rate of rent.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Any other questions? That appears to be all the questions. You did a great job.
Happy to get you back on track.
Thank you. Veteran Services.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Lynn Glass. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for the Department of Veterans Service. And I want to thank you for the opportunity, again, allowing us to appear before you to discuss our current fiscal year budget concerns. Commissioner Wheeler asked me to pass along his regret for not being able to be here to meet with you personally. He actually broke a tooth and is in the chair as we speak. So all things considered, I'm confident that he would much rather be here than where he is right now. So we will nonetheless try to press on. With me today is Mr. Dan Holtz, who is our Director of Health Contracting and Facilities. Mr. Charles Esposito, who's Director of the Georgia War Veterans Nursing Home in Augusta. And Mr. Jim Randles, who is past National Commander of the Military Order of Purple Heart. Referring to Section 47 of the tracking document, and I apologize, I don't know what page that is, or if there even is a page number, but it is Section 47. Line 47.3, you will please note that the Governor has recommended an additional $718,419 to support the continued operation of the Georgia War Veterans Nursing Home in Augusta. Mr. Chairman, as you may recall from our previous appearances before this committee, the cost of providing skilled nursing care services has escalated continuously over the past 5 years. This, coupled with limitations on enhancements over that same period of time, has again put us in a position of facing a rather significant shortfall if additional funding wasn't provided. The Governor's recognition of this and his subsequent proposed enhancement will allow us to avoid a continued underfunding of that facility and will put us in a much, much better or improved position going into fiscal year 08. With this, we would very much appreciate your support of the Governor's $718,000 recommended enhancement for the Georgia War Veterans Nursing Home in the current amended budget request. That concludes my comments, sir, and I'm prepared to answer any questions.
Thank you. Looks like we do have some questions. I believe 26 was on first. Representative James.
One simple, short question. Has been rumored that we are going to close or lose some of our facilities. Can you let us know whether that's a fact or is that just a rumor?
I'm sorry, sir, I didn't hear you.
There's been some rumor that some of our facilities are going to close. Is that a fact?
Are you speaking veterans health care facilities specifically? I'm not aware of that, no, sir.
Okay. Say, Chairman Hill.
You would know, right?
Yes, sir. I'm afraid I have to come back to the same questions, only because we're looking at different things from different departments. Again, about how many employees do you have? 134.
Okay, and you also anticipated in budgeting for your increase in salary and workman's comp.
We did. However, with the governor's, over the past couple of years, with the governor's admonition for us to maintain flat-line budgets from one year to the next, it's been difficult for us to do. And as the two previous departments have stated, we were treated the same way by OPB. They recognized the need and they made the adjustment. We also went a step further, though. We have a couple of positions that we have held open. We haven't filled to give us just a little bit of a cushion in the event that we would need that later on.
Well, we certainly appreciate your holding your budget. And I guess that holds true on any rent from the Georgia Building Authority?
We have, that is correct. Plus, we have 13 offices that are in non-state-owned office space scattered throughout the state that we pay rent on every month. And again, with the level of budget requirements, we have been unable to increase the appropriations we received over the last couple of years for real estate rents. We've had to go back to the property owners and make them aware of that fact and ask them to hold the rents level for us until we get into a better fiscal position to be able to give them an increase. And for the most part, they've been very cooperative in that effort.
Well, thank you so much. I can see why the commissioner might have had a problem with his teeth. It looks like he was biting down on the budget pretty hard. We do appreciate it. Thank you.
I don't see any other lights on. Looks like that's all the questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're just about on schedule. Looks like we have the insurance commissioner here. Well, they're treated differently because...
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner.
How are you doing today? Everybody have a Happy New Year?
I think so.
Our proposals, our budget's actually pretty simple. It's pretty much just a matter of routine adjustments, salary increase 3%, adjustments in real estate, workers' comp, various other things, all pretty standard adjustments in the state health plan. We did have an adjustment in our vehicle count. It's not an adjustment in our vehicles. It's an adjustment in our vehicle count. It was actually an oversight. We were authorized about 2 years ago. We received a vehicle was a gift. It was a donation to the department in our fire safety division for one of our fire safety houses. It was a gift from the Fireman's Fund Foundation, and the receipt of the gift was authorized by OPB, but our count was never changed, so we had one more vehicle than we were supposed to have, but we did get permission to have it, so that was simply changed from 36 to 37 in the fire safety division, but no monetary adjustment. So our total changes is about $1.2 million. Those are all routine, just simple adjustments. And as far as the amended 07, all we really had there was just some internal readjustment, some redistribution of from one division to another of a few dollars. Probably one of your shorter presentations.
Well, we haven't concluded with that's right, the presentation, but we haven't taken all the questions yet. So, and this thing is lit up like a Christmas tree.
This is 08. This is 08.
Yes.
08. We're talking 07.
Yes. I'm sorry. I was giving you both. I'm sorry, for 07 supplemental. For the 07 supplemental, all we have is the redistribution. It's on the second page there. Sorry about that. I was trying to cover two birds with one stone. I apologize.
You got to come back. You got to come back again.
The 07 is simply redistribution. It's moving 13,000 from one division to another division, and that's just simply being handled as internal redistribution with OPB. It's really no other request there.
Looks like we do have a question.
Yes.
26, and I'm sorry, I can't remember who. That Representative James.
Yes.
How are you doing?
Very good. Everything going well for you?
Everything's going great. on the first page there, the little adjustment there.
Yes.
Could you explain that?
Yeah, that's in the 08 budget. That's GBA. They tell me what my rent's going to be, and I have to pay it. Georgia Building Authority. I don't know how they just come up with the rent, and they go up on their rent every year or periodically, and that's just their increase.
What do you pay?
$12.30 last year, $12.97 this year. And that's all state office buildings. That's really all here in the Floyd building.
All of your rent coming from the state. I mean, all of your space is state-owned space, right?
Yes. We had at one time had some non-state space at a county courthouse, but it was like a nominal fee, and actually that's just recently been closed. It was like $100 a year, just some nominal token fee.
Any other questions? Commissioner, looks like that's it. We appreciate you coming today.
Told you, don't you always like short presentations?
We
Get you back on schedule and everything.
We always enjoy your presentation. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you. Good to see you. For the subcommittee, that concludes today's hearings.